Hey there, welcome back to the Complicated Kids podcast. I'm your host, Gabriele Nicolet. I'm a toddler whisperer, a speech therapist, and a parent coach. And today I have Penny Williams back on the pod. Hi, Penny.
Hey there.
And the reason I have Penny Williams back on the pod is because we are going to talk about something called the neutrality of circumstances. So, um, I'm going to jump in first here, and then Penny, you're going to add to this description. But
Yep. Okay.
really what we're talking about when we talk about circumstances, like let's define our terms here. Neutrality means neither good nor bad, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
neutral. And a circumstance, as I learned in coaching school, is something that is happening in the world that is a fact in the world. It is the way what we're taught is like it's provable in a court of law. Like
Mm.
you can say that it happened with certainty. And it turns out that things that we think are circumstances are not actually circumstances. So in this model, for example, words that people say are a circumstance, right? Because they have
Mm.
spoken and those words are in the environment. But if we say somebody yelled at me, that is not a circumstance because
Mm.
yelling is open to interpretation.
Gotcha.
So
Yep.
we have to like get very concrete and very specific when we're talking about circumstances. So I'll pause here so you can add sort of your definition here.
Yeah, I think of everything as a circumstance, actually, just
Mhm.
to sort of simplify the way that I apply this in my own life.
Mhm.
And so anything that happens doesn't automatically have an emotion attached. It just is. It's completely neutral. We get to choose through our thoughts, through our perspective, through our perceptions, what emotion we attach to it, what meaning we give it, what story we write for it, right? So if someone is yelling at me, I can't control the yelling, but I can control the story I tell myself about that. Oh my gosh, that person hates me. I feel so awful. This is the worst thing ever. I'm never going to recover. Or like, wow, their nervous system is really dysregulated right now. And I can see how what I said really upset them. And I'm going to try to repair this.
Yeah.
Two totally different ways to go, right? But it's from the same exact thing that happened. And it does feel emotionally charged. What was most impactful to me about the neutrality of circumstances is that there are things that we feel like you could only feel one way about. It has to be negative, it has to be this awful thing. But the truth is, there's somebody out there who feels the opposite about it. Somebody somewhere feels good about the thing that you feel could never, ever be good. And that sort of was so impactful for me. That
Mhm.
was what helped me shift from a completely victim mindset who thought that I just didn't have the circumstances to be happy. It wasn't in the cards for me, to an entire mindset shift to survivor mode, that psychological survivor mode,
Mhm.
and defining how things are for me, like taking that control, right?
Yeah.
And
There's
I
a
can give, go
Hang
ahead.
on, because I want to jump in here because I think we go immediately to this like negative circumstances are we can change how we feel or we can decide how we feel about something that we are perceiving as negative. But it also works. Like we can also prove this kind of neutrality of circumstances with a positive example. So the one that just came to mind is I fell in love with my husband and I'm still in love with my husband, and that's a beautiful thing. Well, guess what? My ex-boyfriend at the time was pissed about that.
Right.
Right? So, but, right? So we're used to thinking love is beautiful, love is amazing, and that is something that many people might choose to believe, might want to believe. But in the moment that that happened, where I was so happy and my husband was so happy, My ex-boyfriend was not happy. And so
Hmm.
like if we look at that, right, and what you were saying before about like we know because other people are having different thoughts and different feelings about the same circumstance.
Hmm.
And that is again like one of these more positive ones that was not positive for the other guy,
Right,
right?
right. And sometimes it feels like we don't get to choose how we feel or what our thoughts are about something. And, that can be true in the moment, but we can move through that and beyond that, right? So our nervous system might get really upset and trigger some emotion. It doesn't mean that we have to accept and adopt that emotion as the long-term story.
Yeah.
We can work through that feeling, get regulated, and then think about how we really want to go forward with that circumstance.
Yeah. Having said all this about the neutrality, and we'll come back to it because it's a challenging idea. I think
It
certainly
is.
when I first heard this, I was like, are you kidding? Murder is never neutral, for example.
Mm,
And then, we went through some scenarios where, like, good to know, actually, somebody who has been mistreated by the person who was murdered might actually be happy that they're dead, right?
mm,
So you can play this all the ways, but it can feel very affronting. And so I just want to
yeah.
name that like pretty close to the top. If you're hearing this and you're like, no, this can't be true, first of all, go through and just ask yourself, has anyone ever had a different perspective on this event that I'm thinking about? But also, we get to choose our stories. So
Hmm.
I choose to think that murder is generally bad.
Yep.
I am allowed, and that's a story that helps me donate to certain charities, for example. It helps me to take action in the world somehow in a
Hmm.
positive way. So
Hmm.
my story that murder is bad helps me. If I have a story that murder is terrible and it paralyzes me, prevents me from going outside because I'm afraid I might get murdered,
Yeah.
now we're talking about a totally different cascade of events and
Yep.
results that I am creating.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
the piece that's like, wow.
And it illustrates that the key to dealing with anxiety is controlling your thinking, right? And that's why I think, the neutrality of circumstances is part of the cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah,
It's part of working through things that happened, things that were traumatic or things that we have a hard time with.
yeah.
Um,
And as this relates to complicated kids, let's just bring it like home
mhm,
right
mhm,
away, right?
mhm.
We tend to think that the reason we feel anxious is because of our children's behavior. Or we think that the reason we feel anxious is because of our child's diagnosis. But our child's behavior and our child's diagnosis are neutral circumstances in the
Mhm,
world,
mhm.
which is like,
100%. Yep.
whoo, right? So
Yeah,
as
you think it has to be bad, but it doesn't have to be bad.
well, also, it doesn't have to be good either. But this is
No,
right because this
no.
is where it gets weird. It doesn't have anything to do with what we think or feel. It
Mhm,
just is,
mhm,
which is
mhm.
crazy. Like,
Yeah,
that's where the rubber meets the road,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because if we're constantly thinking that we're anxious because of our kid's diagnosis, we're going to constantly look at our kid's diagnosis as bad, 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 bad. And then, we spiral from
I
there.
have to fix it.
We have to
Mhm,
fix it.
mhm,
If we realize that, and you were mentioning this before we hit record, you were like, I thought I was in victim mode. I think you just said it here. I thought I was in victim
mhm.
mode. When you uncoupled your response from the neutral circumstance, you were like, oh, I don't have to fight against that. That just is.
Yep.
Now what? In my own
Yeah,
head, how am I doing
yeah,
this?
yeah. I mean, when my kid was diagnosed with the ADHD first, I was obsessed with ADHD. all day, not all day, every day. I had a job. But if I didn't have to be like super focused on it right away, I was selling real estate at the time. Um, and I got to make my own schedule. I was making a lot of time to obsess about ADHD. And my husband would come in the door and I'd be like, ooh, I talked to this person, I read this, I learned this, you have to, watch this video and all of these things. And with my kids, it was all about like trying to get, calm down, or trying to get one to not worry about the other, and all of the stuff. And then I would lay down at night and I would cry myself to sleep. My poor child, it's all bad, then my husband started avoiding me when he walked in the door. He would go
Mhm.
straight somewhere else, right?
Mhm.
People didn't want to sit at the dinner table with me anymore because that's all I was talking about. And all it was doing was keeping us stuck in the struggle. And life has struggle. None of us are exempt from struggle. And we're not saying we're going to paint everything with this rosy perspective because it's all neutral when it starts. That's not realistic. But when I started down this sort of mindset journey of figuring out how I could be happy, because I didn't think that, circumstances were aligned for me, which is so ridiculous. But unfortunately, I wasted 40 years of my life that way.
Nope.
Um,
Just took
but
you
when
40 years to learn
just,
that lesson.
I just learned it
You didn't waste
late,
any time.
way late, but
Okay,
like
pause,
it
pause, pause, pause,
shifted
pause. No,
everything. Yeah,
pause,
yeah, yeah.
pause. Here's because the image that just came into my head was of a bucket. Okay, and this
Mm,
is a useful analogy for parents whose kids are in therapy, for parents who are in therapy, like anybody who's in therapy. When you are working on a skill, I always think of the capacity for you to have that skill is an empty bucket. And the things you do to learn that skill are water
mm,
in the bucket. But we don't know how much water we're putting in there, and we don't know how big the bucket is. So your bucket was 40 years worth of learning.
yeah,
But once you hit capacity, this is what I want to really point out. Once you hit capacity, boom, it's on, right? And now you're
yeah.
taking all that skill, and you in particular are using it to help a lot of people.
Mm,
So,
yeah,
okay.
because it was life changing.
Yeah.
Like when something's life changing, you get really passionate about it,
Yeah.
right? And the neutrality of circumstance is one of my favorite things to talk about because it changed my life. When I was listening, I just sort of got up one day and I was like, I'm going to figure out how to be happy. I'm going to figure it out. This is going to happen. Right. And I'm like, so what did I do? I binged like all these self help podcasts, and I was driving 6 hours to visit my daughter who had just left for college. And I'm listening to all these podcasts. And the last one before I get there was this episode from Brooke Castillo. I think it's Life School Podcast or Life School
The
Work
life
Podcast or something.
the life coach school podcast,
Life Coach School Podcast.
which is
Thank
where
you.
I trained.
Oh, nice.
Full
Yeah,
circle.
yeah.
Yeah.
She's huge on neutrality of circumstances. And,
Yeah.
like somehow that was the new episode that's that week. So that's where I started with that podcast. And I'm driving on this like pretty much deserted highway with all these trees, just felt so lonely, honestly. And she starts talking about the neutrality of circumstances, and the tears just came, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is what's clicking. I had listened to probably 8 at least other podcasts before that, and I was still like, nope, I'm not gonna, happy's not for me. And then it clicked, and I actually replayed it immediately at the end and listened to it again, and it was just that moment of, I do have something to say about how my life goes. And also, this journey with a complex kid can be different. It can have joy. Like, and as soon as I sort of exhaled, as soon as I started figuring out how to let go of some things, how to accept some things, which I think is the first step in accepting the neutrality of circumstances, is we have to accept that what is what is. Um, and then like the whole house was like, oh, you know, and like it made room for joy. Like I love using that phrase, we have to make room for it. If we are obsessed about how hard everything is, there is no room for it. It can't happen.
Yeah.
We have to make room for it. And this journey, and this thing we're talking about, by the way, is a long journey.
Yeah.
You can't just decide today after you listen to us talk about this that you have fully accepted the neutrality of circumstances and all your thoughts are changing, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
let's be real. It is a process, but if I can do it, thinking that happiness was not even in my fate, I think everyone listening can do it too.
Yeah.
And it's truly life changing. It changes so much for our kids too, right? Because they're not just their diagnosis or they're not just their neuro differences. There's so much more.
Well, and this is where it gets real for me too, which is if we teach a neurodivergent child that they are the sum of their diagnosis and there's nothing they can do about it. Meanwhile,
Mm-hmm.
by the way,
Mm-hmm.
anybody listening is like, of course, that's not what I'm trying to do. Of course, I'm trying to teach them that they have agency and can self advocate. Well, guess what? Your ability to, to think thoughts on purpose
Mm.
about your circumstances is what will set you up for either agency or not, or self advocacy or not, or joy or not. And again, please don't mishear this or us. We are not suggesting that we do a toxic positivity whitewash
Mm-mm.
over
Mm-mm.
the things we think and feel. We are human. Being human means you experience a full range of emotion.
Yeah.
And if you're going to have joy, if you're going to have lots of joy, guess what? It comes with lots of sorrow. One of the other things that Brooke Castillo teaches is this balance of 50-50, that the world
Mm.
is about 50% awesome and about 50% totally terrible. And so, but we have to have both. And you were mentioning some Buddhism principles and things before, which which they had totally had it figured out, by the way, for thousands of years.
Yeah. Totally had it figured out.
There is no dark without the light, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
You actually
Mm-hmm.
can't have one without the other. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah, like
So,
you can't have a rainbow without rain. That
right.
sort of principle, right? Like think about
Yeah.
what has to happen to create something. Nothing happens in a vacuum.
And so this can feel kind of esoteric, maybe. It can feel like a lot to do. And so I think the thing I want to bring up is like, no, we're not just getting rid of every negative thought you've ever thought.
Mm-mm,
Some of those
mm-mm.
things you want to keep, number one. Some of them are very painful, and you should definitely process them with a therapist or a coach or a friend
Yep.
who can help you release that stuff. Because the other thing we know is, emotions, traumas are stored in our bodies, and
Mm-hmm.
we get to, when we're ready, release those and get rid of them and heal ourselves in that way. So that
Yeah.
then, with some practice, one of the things we do at Raising Orchid Kids, I'm sure you have a practice too, but Jen and I always talk about what's your win, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we train our brains to spot wins. And in fact, last week in one of the classes, a parent came and said, "Well, my kid had a meltdown." This was her win, mind you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kid had a
Mm-hmm.
meltdown, and I managed to stay calm.
Yeah.
And we
Huge
were
win.
like, huge win.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because her whole affect, the whole way she handled that situation was completely different. And guess what? Kiddo's meltdown didn't last quite so long that time.
Mm-hmm. And she probably didn't feel it for a week after either, or until the next one.
Exactly. Well, right. And it wasn't another brick in the house of like, my kid has meltdowns every day, all the time.
Yep, yep, yep. And the more you are able to show up calm, the less they start happening because we are giving them calm to attune to,
Yeah.
and we are modeling how we handle a hard situation, right?
Yeah.
There's so many lessons in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to talk too about how this ties into our autonomic nervous system,
Mm,
because our autonomic nervous system controls our experience, right? It takes whatever is coming at us from our environment or internal thinking and gives us a signal of how we're doing, basically. And we can be connected and settled. We can be activated, which is what we often think of as fight or flight, or we can be in that shutdown or freeze mode. And we need to process that and be able to regulate again, right? And so if we are really stuck on the negative of whatever happened, then we're going to be stuck in that dysregulation. But if we can say, okay, my body is signaling that I'm not feeling really great about this thing, let me think about this mindfully, then I can probably get myself back to regulated place, even if I do feel uncomfortable emotions, because I hate calling them negative or bad. So
yeah.
if it truly is an uncomfortable emotion circumstance, I, by processing it and being mindful of it and focusing on how I'm thinking about it and what story I'm telling myself, I can get back to regulated. Because when we feel good, we're able to do good, us, our kids, every human being, right? And so it's so important that when we're focusing on how we're processing it, what story we're telling, we are also regulating ourselves and being able to show up in the ways we want to show up for our kids,
Yeah.
right? Like there's this whole domino effect that goes with this.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, I sound like a crazy person gushing about the neutrality of circumstances, but I swear it completely changed my life
Well, it gives
and
you
my
back,
family.
it gives you back control, is
Yeah.
what it does,
Yeah.
right? Instead of being at the mercy of whether, and this was something silly that we were talking about before we hit record, whether or not it's a rainy day.
Mm-hmm.
There are plenty of us, I was one of them, plenty of us who wake up and think it's raining, that's bad. And all of a
Yep.
sudden, there's a mood that settles over you and it feels like it's beyond your control. Now, I will say, human bodies are sensitive to atmospheric pressure, they are
Yep.
sensitive to light. And so, on a day when it's gray and wet and cold, right? Your body is going to feel a certain way. Okay, but that's not the same as saying it's a terrible day because it's raining. It's not the
Mm-hmm.
same.
Mm-hmm.
The recognition is, oh, I'm not getting as much light. I'm cold and I'm wet. And that is a particular sensation. How am I going to now take care of myself?
Mm.
And
Right. What
part
you
of the,
do with it.
what do you do with it? Right?
Mm-hmm.
We can fight against it. I don't want to go out in the rain. And, some people have control over their schedules and they can do that. That's great. And some people don't. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you know you have to go out in the rain, how are you going to protect both your physical body, but also your like emotional body from just being caught up in that? And again, I'm using a silly, silly example. We just had in the Northeast, in the DMV, we had like, I don't know, 50 sunny days in a row. And while that feels really good to me, and I love it, it means everything's really dry and we're
Yep.
at high risk for forest fires. So talk about neutrality of circumstances, right?
Mm-hmm.
50 sunny days, amazing. If you're a firefighter, you're worried as
You're
hell.
scared.
You're
Yeah.
scared.
Yeah.
And again, that's
Yeah.
something as like banal as the weather. So if we can have those kind of like thoughts and all over the place about the weather, like think about what we can get into as regards other people and their behavior and their
Mm-hmm.
mood and whatever else they're doing. It feels like they're
Yeah. Yeah.
doing it to us and they're not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Acceptance was a huge piece for me in that growth journey, we'll call it, because what you resist will persist. And what we fight, that is where we're putting our energy. If we're putting our energy into something we have no influence or control over, then we can't feel good, right? We can't be okay, even. we need to take that energy by having some acceptance over that thing and put it somewhere where we can do something, right? Where we can influence something. I love doing the locus of control worksheet with my coaching clients. I put it in like every coaching workbook for everything we do because it's so powerful to write it down. Like I can sit here and go, okay, I don't have control over the rain. But if that's something that comes up again and again, and I'm writing it in my circle of things I have zero influence over, I've written it down and now I can like let go of it. I can put it away, right? That physical writing of things makes a difference, especially when we're trying to shift our thinking or to get something out of our head. My brain loves to ruminate because I have anxiety and I just want to fix everything and I want everything. Like I'm very much an idealist, which I've learned to balance over the years, but I have to be accepting whatever is in order to be able to feel better. I
I'm gonna,
have to look at the control aspect and use my acceptance there
yeah,
so that I can do something good with that energy.
yeah. I wanna just point this out because it's language that you're using that other people might be using to should on themselves. We
Mm-hmm.
actually don't have to do anything, right? We
Okay.
get to do things.
Yes.
And I point this out because you and I are quite practiced at detangling from circumstances and understanding that it is our thoughts that create our realities. And the people listening, some of them have done this and some of them have not. And so let's just
Right.
be really clear about you don't have to do any of this. You don't have to listen to this podcast. You
Yeah.
actually don't. Here's another one. You don't have to take care of your kids.
Mm,
You have thoughts that make you want to take care of your kids. You have thoughts
right.
about what other people are going to think about you if you don't take care of them. You have thoughts about what you'll think of yourself. You have thoughts about your obligations and your social responsibility and whatever else you have thoughts about. But the neutral circumstance is no one has to take care of anybody. It's
Right.
something we choose.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to like point that out because I happen to agree with you that like writing things down is a fantastic way to get them out of your head. I think it's been
Yeah.
shown over and over again, and many coaches use that technique because it
Mm-hmm.
works so well. But you don't have to do it. It's your choice. So,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
when
Yeah,
you
I'm
figure
really
out,
bad
yeah,
about that have
no,
to language
yeah,
because for me, like I had to do that in order to feel better. I had to do that to find my joy, right? And so it's funny because I'm so passionate about the neutrality of circumstances, but I'm using all of this like certain language, like
yeah,
you are gonna do this, right?
yeah,
So thank you for pointing
no,
that
no,
out.
no, no.
It's something I need to focus on more probably. Oh, there I go, shitting on myself
So, but again, we do
because I'm
this
human.
because you're human.
Yep.
This is why I love talking to you also. Um, have you ever done the like a writing exercise in which I have done this with my clients where I have them write all the things they think about a certain topic. So
Mm,
child's diagnosis or the weather or traffic. Here's another like
yeah.
stupid example, right? Like
Especially for you.
yeah, especially for me in DC. We do not control the traffic. If I am allowing myself to become activated, if I'm allowing my nervous system to become activated every time I'm stuck in traffic, that is energy that's leaking away from helping other people and helping myself stay calm. Why would I do
Hmm.
that? Why?
Hmm. Hmm.
I used to get really upset in traffic. I used to have a neck thing that I went to physical
Yep.
therapy for, and like just aggravation over aggravation. What is the point? There isn't one. Newsflash. Right? But so all the thoughts about traffic. It shouldn't happen. People should drive. They shouldn't be on their phone. They should look around. They shouldn't turn right on red. Like every thought, every thought. And then you do the opposite, just to
Mm,
break your brain a little bit
yeah. In a good way.
in a good way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And be like, actually, they should illegally turn right on red. And then your brain goes, what?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it creates a little bit of wiggle room for anybody who's interested, who's like, oh my God, what can I do? There's a great worksheet on Byron Katie's work
Mm,
website called
yeah.
the Work. If you
The
search
work.
Byron Katie's The Work, you will find it. She has these turnarounds that she has you do, which are nonsensical beyond belief, but they
Mm-hmm.
go a long way toward just kind of like just
Yeah.
wiggling a little bit. It's like a tooth that you
Mm-hmm.
just keep wiggling. Eventually, it's going to come out.
Yeah. One of her big ones is what does what does my kid's behavior and what does my reaction to my kid's behavior say about me? Like putting up a mirror, and which feels crazy, completely crazy, but yet it's real. It helps you to see what is triggering your own reaction out of your own stuff, which is so often the work that we're doing with complex kids and parents is untangling our own stuff from our kids' stuff. And that's a lot of work that has to happen too, right? Or that
Yeah.
doesn't have to and
Ooh,
doesn't should.
that can.
Um,
A lot of work that can happen.
it can
Yeah.
if you want to feel different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, you're really challenging me in my language. And I challenge
Somebody
parents on their language all the time.
somebody did it to me. I have been the beneficiary of people who said, you know, you do talk a lot about things you have to do. Why are you doing that? You don't have to do any of it. And I was
Mm,
like, but I do have to do it. I'm a responsible person,
right, right.
right? A
And there
responsible.
and there are things that we can tell ourselves we have to do for ourselves,
Mhm.
right? That's okay. We just shouldn't be telling other people what they have to do
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they write their own story and they need to figure out how they feel about things.
Yeah.
Yeah. A minute ago, I wrote down do it on purpose. You had said something about on purpose, and it triggered that quote from Dolly Parton for me. It's one of my favorites. It was my quote of the year last year. I was like, or over this past year, because I was turning 50 and I was very not happy about it.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, how can I make this experience easier, better, like not so hard on myself? And I said, okay, I'm gonna turn 50 on purpose. I'm just gonna lean into this. What can I do to make this an experience that I have some sort of positive relationship with, right? And I had planned to go zip lining, which anybody who knows me, I'm very anxious. It was not like something that would have been easy, but my father and I were going to go zip lining. It was going to be super amazing. And then Hurricane Helene happened. And so on my 50th birthday, I was just like going places trying to find internet and communicate. And it really was like not a thing at all. Right. But I had built it up into it's going to be this huge, horrible thing. And then I said, wait a minute, I can take control of this. Right. I can take control of this narrative. I can do it on purpose. And just that thought, like I'm going to do this on purpose, gave me a sense of control where I can't control time. Like I've been on this planet 50 years now. It is what it is, right? I can fight it all I want and feel crappy, or I can just lean in and do it on purpose. And I think that just sparked when you said that. And it's something that I've been trying to be more mindful about. Like in anything, if I'm gonna do something with my kid. Okay, how can I be purposeful with this? If I'm going to do something for my business or for other parents, how can I be purposeful with this? Because that word gives us a sense of control. And that sense of control is such a relief. It's such a relief.
It's so interesting because it puts the locus of control exactly where it should be, which is
Mm-hmm.
within ourselves. I actually am
Yeah.
super vibing on this right now. Like, do it on purpose. Are you having this thought on purpose? Are you
Yeah.
having this feeling? Are you allowing this feeling on purpose? And that, for our listeners here, and we're going to wrap up in a second, is like maybe that's a really functional question for people.
It
I
is.
think it's going to be one that I am going to use for the next little bit here. Like,
Mm-hmm.
am I doing this
Mm-hmm.
on purpose? Um,
A great example is like, I am so bad when I get in the car, I just go. And so often I don't go where I was supposed to go. I forget where I was going and I'll like not get on the interstate or I'll get on the wrong interstate because up the road from me there's two right in a row. And like one day I was going to therapy and I got halfway down Interstate 40 and I was like, shit, this is
wrong
not where I
way.
was going. This is the very long way. And I had to like voice text my therapist and say, I'm going to be late. I got on the wrong damn interstate. And she was like, how did you do that? And I'm like, because when I get in the car, it's just like, it feels so like muscle memory that I am not mindful enough
Mhm.
about the journey. And often I'm listening to podcasts and I'm like in another space, I'm either listening to like secular Buddhism or my favorite right now is the Good Life Project, which is amazing,
Nice.
amazing. Um, or I'm listening to crime and murder. It's one or the other.
Ah!
It's how to be happy or it's these poor people got slaughtered because I'm a student of behavior.
Yeah. Yep.
Not because I get any sort of thrill out of death or anything, but for me, it's like a study of behavior and human nature. But
Mm.
anyway, um, you know, it's a practice to stay mindful of what you're doing and I just felt like that was a good example of like doing it on purpose and how we so often don't. Like
Yep.
I think especially when we're busy and overwhelmed, we sort of check out and we just go. Our thoughts just happen, we just ended up, you know, at this destination, but we don't even remember the drive there and all of these things. And if we just say to ourselves a few times a day, even, okay, the next thing I'm doing it on purpose. What does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah.
You're going to start changing that habit, that pattern.
That's right. And it's not that we're not going to go unconscious. We are, because a part of what I wanted to say here was brains want to make things efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of beginning a mindfulness practice is it feels real onerous. It feels
Yeah, like
like
wasting your
you're
time.
like wasting your time. It feels like
Mm-hmm.
too much work. It feels like, oh, I did it wrong again. Like all of that, right? And the only reason that is because brains like to be efficient because
Yeah.
it saves energy, it saves brain power. Brain is not worried about where the next source of energy is coming from. Like there's an evolutionary process there. But these are higher level neurological functions that we get to
Mm-hmm.
cultivate, that we're super able to cultivate, even if you have a diagnosis of ADHD where it's hard to stay regulated, you can still practice mindfulness and your brain will still change.
Yeah.
Right?
And you can practice mindfulness for literally like 2 minutes a day, and
Mhm.
it will make a difference, a
How do you know,
big
Penny? How do you
difference.
know?
I'm terrible about daily practice. I have to admit, I was just showing you before we start recording that I just bought this box of vagus nerve exercise cards that has a little stand. So every day I can put one on the stand. It's right here in front of my computer where I sit all day and work. And I literally did that. And I did the box breathing, which was the card I pulled today
Mhm.
before we got on together.
Yeah.
It should I maybe have done that like when I first woke up or whatever, who cares? Like I got it in today.
Yeah.
I also use a habit tracker app
Hmm.
because I'm trying to make changes, but I'm really bad about again that daily sort of stuff. And I am a box checker though. And so that habit tracker, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna, if I'm doing this thing 3 times this week, I'm going to make sure I have checked all 3 boxes
Hmm.
before that thing rolls over on Sunday night. Like, not always, but a lot of time. I've been really thrown off by the hurricane and stuff. And so I'm trying to get back. And this deck of cards was one of the ways that I said, hey, this will help me to remember and to make it easy for me to
Yeah.
do this thing. I did that box breathing for like 60 seconds or less, but I felt so much more grounded and chill
Yeah.
so that we could get on together and have a great conversation, right?
Yeah. I also want to just note here, even in the course of the past hour, and this is apropos of like the rainy day, feeling like, oh, it's a bad day.
Mm,
Your whole physical state has shifted in the time that we've been
mm,
talking. My
yeah.
whole physical state has shifted. I came on this call like very tired and very feeling very scattered.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to, and you came on feeling heavy
Very heavy.
emotionally.
Yeah.
And you might go back to that place. That's okay. But right now, this has been like such a yummy space. And I hope the listeners can
Yeah.
can feel that. We're allowed to have this, and we're allowed to have the heaviness and the tiredness and the scatteredness.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're
Things can
allowed
be
to have,
hard and they can be good
yeah,
and happy at the same time.
yeah,
Not the same things, but like things in general, your life things. Yeah. And the magic there, I think, for us in this space, in this time, is connection. One, because we know connection is regulating, and also like talking about things that we're really passionate about, like leaning into what interests us
mhm,
is going to be regulating, and helping other people. Like, in our survival to success program, we have this regulation kit with cards, for kids with regulation activities, and one of them is actually helping someone else, because it does make us feel good. It does bring that positive energy and it is regulating. So like there was a lot of regulatory magic happening here.
yeah. Penny Williams, it's always a treat to talk to you. Thank you for coming back
You
on the
too.
podcast, and
Thanks for
tell
having
the
me.
good people, in case they live under a rock, where they should find you. And tell us like explicitly, I know you just like kind of dropped it in there, but tell us about this new program that you've got going, please.
Yeah, so you can find me at parentingadhdandautism.com. And I've been sort of pivoting a little bit more. I really also include anxiety, any complex kid there. I've had that URL for, I think, at least a decade now. So it's
Yep.
real hard to change it, but I really am just working with parents of complex kids, neurologically differently wired, right? But the podcast Beautifully Complex is linked there. All my social media is linked there. And January 1 of 2025, I'm launching the Regulated Kids Project, which is a membership for parents that I am crazy excited about. Like every time I talk about it, I get really joyful. And, it's the one thing that I wish I had known at the very beginning of my parenting journey: the autonomic nervous system, regulation, and emotional intelligence. Those lay the foundation for actual thriving
Yep.
for a lifetime, not just for today or tomorrow or next week, for a lifetime. So, this membership is going to be all about regulation and emotional intelligence, not just for our kids, but ourselves too, because we have the same, humanness to us. Um, and I'm hoping it's just going to be this warm community where we support each other in what's hard and that struggle, but we're also celebrating successes and just really having people to lean on. My book, Boy Without Instructions, was my first book. It was like our life from, um, just before kindergarten to, I think, fifth grade. My kid just turned 22 now. So this was a long time ago, but like it was me blogging originally
Mhm.
about how hard everything was and what that experience was like to be that parent. And it's the better selling of all the books, even though I'm like, here's how to help your kid do this. People want to feel less alone. And I get emails every week or social media posts every week. I felt like I could have wrote that. I feel so much less alone.
Yeah.
And that's been part of my focus as a parent coach for neurodiverse families, is making sure that we're connecting with each other and we don't feel so alone. Because if you let it, that's exactly what that journey is going to be.
That's
If
it.
you're not doing it on purpose, right, it is going to be very isolating. So I think there's going to be lots of warm wonderfulness coming out of it. But I'm also really excited to help parents like build regulation, build emotional intelligence, because I didn't know to do it. I didn't know
Yep.
to do it until my kids were teenagers.
Yeah.
Like
And it's
it
so
changes
much
everything.
more, it's so much more important than teaching them colors and numbers and shapes. Like Nobody
Yes.
cares about that stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's really the foundation of being a, I hate using this word, but a good human, right?
Yep.
Like it's the foundation of being a, what can we put there? What word can we put there,
Full.
Gabrielle?
Full.
A full, fulfilled human, something
Yeah.
like that, right? Like it's it's setting the path
Yeah.
for maximizing the potential for joy and feeling successful and feeling fulfilled
Yeah. Yeah.
now and later.
Ooh, I'm super excited. I'm going to be in there at some point.
Yes, I'm going to have
So
guest surprise experts. I'm
yeah,
very excited.
surprise.
We'll have you in, have a Q&A.
Awesome.
Um, it's going
It's
to
going to
be
be fun.
lovely.
Good. I will
Hmm.
put all of that in the show notes.
Thank
And
you.
until next time, take care. Thanks, Penny.
Thank you so much.